My name is Fiona Martinez, and 8 years ago, my sister's confidential concern email cost me everything. Picture this. Your own sister sends a confidential concern email that destroys your career at Goldman Sachs. Your mother sides with her because family protects family. You rebuild everything from nothing, create a $2.1 million startup, and then they show up at your launch party, not to celebrate, but to demand money. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 5 years, with legal documents that would change everything. Before I take you through this journey of betrayal, rebuilding, and the ultimate boundary-setting moment, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if stories about turning pain into power truly resonate with you. I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now let me take you back to where it all began, in a gleaming conference room where my voice was about to cost me everything. The Goldman Sachs conference room on the 47th floor had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of Manhattan that still makes my chest tight when I remember it. I sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, my quarterly presentation remote trembling slightly in my hand. Not from nerves about the content, I knew my analysis was solid, but because I knew what would happen the moment I opened my mouth. "Could you speak up, Fiona?" Richard, the senior VP, barely glanced up from his phone. "We can't hear you down here." I cleared my throat and leaned toward the microphone. "The merger valuation shows a 15% overestimate." 15%? Tom from M&A practically shouted over me, his voice bouncing off the glass walls. "That's ridiculous. My team's analysis shows maybe 5, maximum." This was how it always went. My voice, naturally soft, and what my college professor once called disappointingly timid, became my biggest professional liability. It didn't matter that my analysis had been right on the last 3 major deals. It didn't matter that I'd caught a $2 million error in due diligence just last month. When you sound like you're apologizing for existing, people assume your work is just as weak. The meeting continued with Tom dominating the conversation, using my research points as his own. I made 3 more attempts to contribute, each one dying in the air between my mouth and their ears. By the end, Richard assigned Tom to lead the presentation to the client, my presentation, built on my 60-hour work weeks and weekend analysis. As I packed up my laptop, I caught my reflection in the black screen. 32 years old, 5 years at the firm, and still sitting in the same analyst position while people who started after me had already made associate. My annual review was coming up in 3 weeks, and this project was supposed to be my breakthrough moment. I texted my sister Rebecca that evening. "Rough day. That big project I mentioned might not happen." Her response came immediately. "Tell me everything over dinner Sunday. Mom's making your favorite." I should have noticed how quickly she responded. I should have wondered why she suddenly cared about my work struggles when she usually spent family dinners talking about her real estate sales. But I was tired, defeated, and desperately needed someone to listen. I had no idea she was already typing notes. Sunday dinner at Mom's house in Queens followed the same script it had for years. The dining room smelled like her famous arroz con pollo, family photos covered every wall, and Rebecca commanded the conversation from her seat at Dad's old place at the head of the table. "Closed another property in Forest Hills," Rebecca announced, sliding her phone across the table to show photos. 4 bedrooms, asking price exceeded by 12%. That's my 3rd this month." "Such a natural saleswoman," Mom beamed, squeezing Rebecca's hand. "Just like your father was. Fiona, why don't you tell us about your work?" I pushed rice around my plate. "It's fine, same corporate stuff." "Come on," Rebecca leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wineglass. "You mentioned a big project. What's it about?" Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe I just needed someone to understand why I came home defeated every day. I started talking. "It's a $50 million acquisition, tech company buying a smaller competitor. I've been analyzing their patents and revenue projections for 2 months." I took another sip of wine. "Found some major discrepancies in their reported user numbers. Could tank the whole deal if I'm right." Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "That sounds intense. Who else knows about this? Just my team. It's all confidential until the announcement next month. I noticed her typing on her phone. Are you even listening? Of course. Just making a note about something for tomorrow. She smiled but didn't look up from her screen. So this could really hurt your company if it goes wrong? It could hurt the client. That's why accuracy matters more than speaking up? Rebecca's voice carried that familiar edge. Fiona, you've always been too quiet for your own good. Maybe this corporate world isn't for you. Mom nodded. Your sister has a point. In sales, you have to project confidence, command the room. They spent the next 20 minutes dissecting my communication style, my career choices, my entire approach to life. Rebecca kept typing between criticisms, her phone screen reflecting off her glasses. When I finally escaped to the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. Just get through dessert, I whispered to myself. I didn't know Rebecca had already hit send on an email that would destroy everything by morning. Monday morning, 7:47 a.m. I was reviewing my presentation one final time when my phone buzzed. HR wants to see you, now. The walk to human resources felt like a funeral march. Other analysts glanced up from their desks as I passed, their expressions unreadable. The elevator ride to the 30th floor lasted forever, and not nearly long enough. Patricia from HR sat behind her desk with Richard, my SVP, and someone from legal I'd never seen before. A printed email lay face up on the desk between us. Fiona, please sit. Patricia's voice was professionally neutral. We received a concerning communication over the weekend. Richard slid the paper toward me. The subject line hit me like ice water. Confidential. Concerns about Fiona Martinez's competence and discretion. The email detailed my inability to maintain confidentiality, citing specific details about the merger I'd mentioned at dinner. It questioned my judgment, my professionalism, and suggested I was a liability to the firm's reputation. The sender's email was anonymized through a privacy service, but it came from an IP address in Forest Hills, Queens. My hands went cold. Forest Hills, where Rebecca had just closed a property. This contains information that only someone on your team would know, Richard said. Have you discussed this merger with anyone outside the firm? My voice cracked. My family, just general terms. I didn't think. You disclosed details of a $50 million transaction to unauthorized parties, legal interrupted. It was my sister, at dinner. I didn't give specifics about the client names or. The email mentions patent analysis and user number discrepancies. Patricia highlighted sections of the printout. Those are extremely specific details. I stared at the highlighted text. Those were my exact words from dinner, twisted just enough to sound like reckless disclosure rather than exhausted venting to family. We have a zero-tolerance policy on confidentiality breaches, Richard said. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Security will escort you to clear your desk. But the presentation is tomorrow. The client needs to know about the discrepancies. Tom will handle it. Richard stood up. Your access has already been revoked. 20 minutes later, I stood on the sidewalk holding a cardboard box of my belongings, watching the building where I'd spent 5 years trying to prove myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Heard you had a rough morning. Mom's making coffee if you want to talk. She knew. She already knew. I drove straight to Mom's house, my hands shaking with rage. Rebecca's BMW was already in the driveway. Of course it was. I found them in the kitchen, coffee brewing, acting like this was any other Monday. Fiona! Mom rushed over. Rebecca said you might stop by. What happened? Ask her. I stared at my sister, who was casually scrolling through her phone. Ask Rebecca about the anonymous email. Rebecca looked up, her expression perfectly innocent. What email? The one sent from Forest Hills, the one with everything I told you at dinner. My voice cracked. You got me fired. You're being paranoid. She set down her phone. Maybe you shouldn't have been talking about confidential work. I was talking to my family. I trusted you. Fiona, stop this. Mom stepped between us. Your sister would never. The IP address, Mom. It came from Forest Hills, where she was yesterday. Rebecca laughed, cold and sharp. IP addresses can be spoofed. Besides, you just admitted you violated your company's policy. That's on you. You took notes. I watched you typing while I talked. I was checking my listings. She shrugged. Not my fault you're too weak for corporate life. Enough, Mom's voice cut through the room. Fiona, you're upset and looking for someone to blame, but family doesn't do this to each other. She literally just. Family protects family, Mom said firmly, even when they make mistakes. You made a mistake talking about work. Accept responsibility. I looked between them. My mother, who'd raised me to trust family above all else, and my sister, who'd weaponized that trust. Rebecca's slight smirk told me everything I needed to know. You knew, I whispered to Mom. You knew what she was going to do. Mom's silence was my answer. I left without another word. In my car, I called the only person I could think of, Sarah Williams, a woman I'd met at a networking event who ran the Women's Startup Center. Fiona, you sound terrible. What happened? I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Come to the center tomorrow. We have a workshop on rebuilding after career setbacks. And Fiona, document everything. Email trails, text messages, all of it. Why? Because sometimes the best revenge is massive success. And when you get there, and you will, you'll want protection from the people who tried to tear you down. 6 months of rejection emails. 6 months of, we've decided to go with another candidate, and your experience doesn't quite match our needs. Word travels fast in Manhattan finance circles. The story had morphed from a confidentiality breach to corporate espionage, depending on who was telling it. My savings account dropped from $47,000 to $12,000. The mortgage application for my dream apartment was denied. I moved from my Upper East Side studio to a shared apartment in Brooklyn, sleeping on an air mattress and eating ramen twice a day. But Tuesday nights at the Women's Startup Center kept me sane. Sarah's workshop wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about reimagining. Surrounded by women who'd been pushed out, passed over, or purposely sabotaged, I found something I'd never had at Goldman Sachs: voices that insisted on being heard. Your analytical skills are invaluable, Sarah said during our one-on-one session. What if instead of analyzing deals for others, you created something yourself? That night, I started sketching out an idea. A fintech platform that would help small business owners understand their true valuation before entering negotiations. No more information asymmetry. No more getting bulldozed by louder voices. 3 weeks into development, Mom called. Rebecca feels terrible about what happened, she said. She wants to apologize. She admitted it? She admits there was a misunderstanding. The family wants to move forward. A misunderstanding? I laughed bitterly. She destroyed my career. You're being dramatic. Family forgives. Come to dinner Sunday. I hung up. Then I called Sarah. I need to talk to someone about protecting future assets, I said. If I build something successful, I want to make sure certain people can never touch it. I know just the person. James Thompson, estate planning attorney. He specializes in protective trusts for entrepreneurs. The meeting with James was illuminating. He sat in his downtown office, listening to my story without judgment, occasionally taking notes. You want an irrevocable trust with specific beneficiary requirements, he said. Once established, you can't change it, even under pressure. The beneficiary must be present to receive any distributions. Can I name a beneficiary that isn't a person? His smile was knowing. You can name an organization. Many of my clients do. It protects the assets while supporting causes they believe in. And if someone tries to claim the money, they'd need the beneficiary present. If that's an organization, they'd need authorized representatives. It's airtight. I signed the papers that day, naming something that didn't exist yet, but would. My future success, protected from the past that tried to destroy me. 3 years. That's how long it took to go from Air Mattress to Series A funding. The platform, Value True, started with 5 beta users I met at the Women's Startup Center. Within 6 months, we had 500 small businesses using our valuation tools. By year 2, venture capitalists were calling. The same week I turned down Rebecca's 5th attempt to reconnect over coffee, I accepted a $2.1 million investment from Andreessen Horowitz. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl whose voice was too quiet to be heard in conference rooms was now leading meetings with some of Silicon Valley's loudest personalities. Except now, they leaned in to hear every word. "Your analysis is impeccable," Marcus Chen, our lead investor, said, after reviewing our quarterly projections. "Goldman Sachs really fucked up letting you go." I didn't tell him it wasn't exactly voluntary. The trust James had set up 3 years earlier suddenly mattered. With success comes vultures, and I could feel them circling. Rebecca's LinkedIn connection request. Mom's sudden interest in my little computer project. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years commenting on every TechCrunch article that mentioned Value True. Then came the invitation that changed everything. "We want to feature your launch party," Bloomberg's event coordinator said. 200 of tech's biggest names, full media coverage. This could put Value True on the map globally. The Ritz-Carlton Ballroom, February 15th. Champagne, presentations, and the kind of networking that transforms companies from startups to institutions. I said yes. Then I called James. "I need to make a small adjustment to the trust," I said. "You can't change the beneficiary. It's irrevocable." "I don't want to change it. I want to fund it. $1 million transferred from my personal assets." That's significant. "May I ask why now?" "Because I have a feeling certain people are about to reappear in my life, and when they do, I want to be ready." James scheduled the transfer for February 14th, the day before the launch party. The beneficiary, the Women's Startup Center, had no idea they were about to receive the largest single donation in their history. I spent the next week preparing 2 presentations, one for the investors about Value True's future, and one for the family I knew would show up uninvited. Only one would be about money. The other would be about boundaries. Rebecca texted the night before the party. "Heard about your big event. Mom and I are so proud. See you tomorrow." I didn't respond, but I did forward the message to James with 2 words. "They're coming." If you've ever felt betrayed by family, drop a comment below. I read every single one and it helps me know I'm not alone. Also, what would you have done in my situation? Before we continue to the shocking twist at my launch party, please hit that like button if this story resonates with you. Your support helps other women find these stories of strength and boundaries. Now let me tell you what happened when my mother and sister walked into that ballroom, uninvited but dressed like they belonged there. The Ritz-Carlton Ballroom sparkled with the kind of elegance that whispered money rather than shouted it. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over 200 guests, venture capitalists, tech journalists, successful founders who'd become mentors. I stood near the stage, practicing my presentation one final time, when Sarah touched my elbow. "Fiona, you have unexpected guests." I turned to see them at the entrance. Mom wore her best dress, the navy one from Macy's she saved for special occasions. Rebecca had gone all out, a designer dress I recognized from her Instagram, probably $3,000, paired with the Louboutins she'd bought after her biggest sale. They moved through the crowd like they belonged there, Rebecca's voice carrying as she introduced herself to my investors. "I'm Rebecca Martinez, Fiona's sister. We're so proud of her journey. Family support means everything, doesn't it?" Marcus Chen looked confused as he shook her hand. He glanced at me across the room, and I saw the question in his eyes. I'd never mentioned family. Not once in 3 years of meetings. Mom found me during the cocktail hour, pulling me into a hug that felt like a performance. "My successful daughter," she said it loud enough for nearby guests to hear. We always knew you'd make something of yourself. Mom, you weren't invited. Don't be silly. Family doesn't need invitations. She waved at a photographer. Make sure you get one of us together. Rebecca appeared at her side, champagne in hand. The prodigal sister returns to the fold. This is quite a step up from Goldman Sachs. You mean the job you destroyed? Water under the bridge. She smiled for another photographer. We're here to celebrate your success. Our success. The Martinez family's success. The way she said our made my skin crawl. The lights dimmed for the presentation to begin. I walked to the stage, my prepared speech on the tablet in front of me. 200 faces looked up expectantly. In the third row, Mom and Rebecca sat front and center, phones out to record. I delivered my presentation flawlessly. The numbers, the projections, the vision for ValueTrue's future. The audience applauded. Several investors nodded approvingly. We were about to close another round of funding, and everyone in the room could smell success. Then Mom stood up during the Q&A session. I have something to say, she announced, and my blood turned to ice. My daughter is too humble to mention this, Mom's voice carried through the ballroom's sound system. Someone had handed her a microphone. But her success is a family achievement. The Martinez family has always supported each other through everything. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. This wasn't part of the agenda. Which is why, Mom continued, we're so excited about establishing the Martinez Family Foundation. Fiona will be funding it, of course, as a way to give back to the family that stood by her during the difficult times. My hand gripped the podium. Rebecca stood up beside Mom, her smile camera ready. We're thinking an initial investment of $500,000, Rebecca added, taking the microphone. Just to start. After all, when Goldman Sachs turned their back on her, we were there. Family invests in family. The room went silent. 200 pairs of eyes ping-ponged between them and me. Marcus Chen's expression had shifted from confusion to concern. The Bloomberg reporter was typing furiously. I felt the old familiar tightness in my throat, the one that used to silence me in conference rooms. But then I saw Sarah in the back row, her slight nod giving me strength. James Thompson stood near the exit, his phone already in hand. That's an interesting announcement, I said into my microphone, my voice steady and clear. But there seems to be some confusion. No confusion, Rebecca said quickly. We discussed this as a family. We haven't spoken in 3 years. Details, Mom waved her hand dismissively. The point is, successful families share their success. Isn't that right, everyone? She was playing to the crowd, trying to corner me with social pressure. A few uncomfortable murmurs rose from the audience. You're absolutely right, Mom, I said, and her face lit up with triumph. Success should be shared, which is why I need to clarify something important. I pulled out my phone, sending a quick text to James. Now. Since you've made this public announcement about family money, I continued, I think everyone here should know the truth about our family's financial arrangements. Rebecca's smile faltered. Fiona, this isn't the time. You made it the time when you hijacked my launch party. I looked directly at the Bloomberg reporter. And since we're talking about family investments and who supported whom, I think transparency is important. James walked onto the stage, briefcase in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, meet James Thompson, my estate attorney. He has some documents that might interest you. This isn't necessary, Rebecca said quickly, but the microphone caught the panic in her voice. James approached the podium with practiced calm. Ms. Martinez asked me to be present in case of any confusion about financial arrangements. I believe now would be appropriate. Fiona, Mom's voice turned sharp. This is family business. You made it everyone's business, I replied. James, please continue. He pulled out a single document. 3 years ago, Ms. Martinez established an irrevocable trust. Given the public nature of this discussion, she's authorized me to share its existence. Rebecca stepped forward. How much is in it? That's confidential, James replied smoothly. What I can share is that it has very specific distribution requirements. The audience was riveted. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Whatever the requirements, Mom said, recovering her composure. Family comes first. We'll work with whatever structure Fiona has created. I'm afraid that won't be possible, James said. The beneficiary has already been designated and cannot be changed. When can distributions be made? Rebecca demanded. Only when the beneficiary is present to receive them. Mom smiled, relief flooding her face. Well, we're here now, both of us. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said, taking back the microphone. James, since my family has made this a public matter, perhaps you should clarify who the beneficiary actually is. James nodded. The sole beneficiary must be present, with proper identification and authorization to receive any distributions. We're present, Rebecca nearly shouted. But you're not the beneficiary, James said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went from confused to pale. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then who? Mom started. Given the public nature of this discussion, I said, I'm happy to share that information. The beneficiary is an organization that actually supported me when my family didn't. Sarah, would you mind joining us on stage? Sarah Williams walked up, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes warm with understanding. The Women's Startup Center has been the designated beneficiary for 3 years, James announced. As of yesterday, the trust was fully funded with $1 million. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed. The Bloomberg reporter was typing so fast I thought her laptop might catch fire. Rebecca's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You gave $1 million to strangers? No, I said calmly. I gave it to family, my chosen family. This is fraud, Rebecca's voice cracked as she spun toward the audience. She's hiding money from her real family. There's no fraud, James said evenly. Everything was done legally and properly documented. Mom grabbed the microphone from Rebecca. Fiona, how could you humiliate us like this? We're your blood. The same blood that got me fired? My voice carried without the microphone now. The same blood that sided with my sister when she destroyed my career? That was a misunderstanding, Mom protested. No, it was a choice. You chose to protect Rebecca after she sent that email. You chose family loyalty over truth. I turned to address the room. I apologize for this disruption to our celebration, but since my family decided to make financial demands publicly, I thought you should all know where ValueTrue's values truly lie. Sarah stepped forward. The Women's Startup Center is deeply grateful for Fiona's generosity. This donation will help us support 50 more female entrepreneurs who've faced workplace discrimination. The audience began to applaud. It started slowly, with Sarah's team, then spread through the investors, the journalists, the entire room. Marcus Chen stood up, clapping deliberately, while staring directly at my mother and sister. You ungrateful! Rebecca started moving toward me, but security had already begun walking toward the stage. Ma'am, we need you to leave, the head of security said quietly to Rebecca. This is a family matter, Mom protested. This is a private event, I said, and you weren't invited. Security, please escort them out. As security approached, Mom played her last card. If you do this, you're no longer my daughter. The room went silent again. This was the moment, the line you're never supposed to cross, the threat every toxic family makes when boundaries get real. I haven't been your daughter since you chose Rebecca's lies over my truth, I said. I've been my own person, building my own family, creating my own success, and none of it, not $1, not one moment, not one breath, belongs to you. Security flanked them on both sides. Rebecca tried to shake them off, her designer heels clicking against the marble as she was guided toward the exit. Mom followed, but turned back one last time. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I said clearly, is waiting 3 years to do it. The doors closed behind them. The room stayed silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause returned, thunderous this time. Can you imagine their faces? If you're still watching, you're probably wondering what happened next. Before we get to their reaction and the permanent boundaries I set, I want to ask, Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own values? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in supporting women entrepreneurs, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of people who understand that real family isn't always blood. Now here's what happened after security escorted them out, and how the next year changed everything. The ballroom doors had barely closed when Marcus Chen approached me on stage. That was, he paused, choosing his words carefully. That was the most honest thing I've seen at a tech event, ever. I'm sorry for the disruption. Don't apologize. You just showed everyone in this room exactly who you are. Someone who sets boundaries and keeps them. He glanced at the door where my family had exited. Value true just became a lot more valuable to me. Within minutes, I was surrounded. Investors wanting to increase their stakes, journalists asking for exclusive interviews, other founders sharing their own family horror stories. But I could barely focus on any of it because my phone was exploding. The first video hit Twitter within 10 minutes. Founder publicly disowns gold-digging family was trending within an hour. By midnight, the story had gone viral on LinkedIn with a different angle. Why this founder's $1 million donation just changed Silicon Valley. But it wasn't the viral moment that mattered, it was what happened next. James approached me as the party wound down. You should know they're not done. Your sister was on the phone with someone as security escorted them out. It sounded like she was already planning legal action. Let them try, Sarah said, joining us. We have everything documented, including, I should mention, the email trail from 3 years ago when Fiona first came to us. You kept those? I keep everything, including the screenshots Rebecca posted on Facebook bragging about putting her sister in her place the week you were fired. I stared at her. She posted about it? Then deleted it. But screenshots are forever. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing me the evidence I never knew existed. I've been waiting 3 years for you to be ready to see these. The posts were damning. Rebecca bragging about her strategic email that would teach Fiona her place. Mom commenting with applause emojis. Cousins congratulating her on handling the situation. Send those to James, I said quietly, just in case. The next morning I woke to 47 missed calls from Mom, 23 from Rebecca, and dozens of texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some were threatening legal action. Others were playing the guilt card. A few were pretending nothing had happened, asking about investment opportunities. I blocked them all, but Rebecca wasn't done. That afternoon, a process server showed up at my office. Fiona Martinez, you're being sued for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation. I called James immediately. I expected this, he said calmly. Don't worry. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And as for emotional distress, they crashed your event and demanded money publicly. We have 200 witnesses. So what do I do? Nothing. Let them waste their money on lawyers. Meanwhile, you focus on your company. Success is the best response. The lawsuit lasted exactly 43 days before Rebecca's lawyer withdrew from the case. James called me with the news on a Tuesday morning. Her attorney reviewed the evidence we provided, the Facebook screenshots, the email forensics showing the IP address, and signed affidavits from 5 Goldman Sachs employees who remembered her calling to check on you the day before the email was sent. She called my coworkers? Apparently she was fishing for information to make the anonymous email more credible. Your former colleague Tom was particularly helpful. He kept notes of her strange questions about confidentiality policies. The irony was delicious. Tom, who'd stolen my presentations for years, had inadvertently documented Rebecca's scheme. But the legal victory was nothing compared to what happened in the business world. The viral video had an unexpected effect. 3 more major investors reached out, specifically citing my integrity under pressure as a reason they wanted in. Value True's next funding round closed at $8.7 million, well above our target. The Women's Startup Center used the $1 million donation to launch a new program, the Phoenix Initiative, specifically for women who'd been pushed out of corporate careers. Within 6 months, they'd helped launch 32 new companies. I was invited to speak at their first graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking at those faces, women who'd been betrayed, undermined, silenced, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for what Rebecca did, but for where it led me. The worst thing that ever happened to me, I told them, became the foundation for the best thing I ever built. A year after the launch party, I received an unexpected email. The subject line made me pause. From Rebecca, please read. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Fiona, I lost my real estate license last month. The video of the party went viral in our industry too. Clients don't trust me anymore. Mom and I are barely speaking. She blames me for humiliating the family. I'm not writing to ask for money or forgiveness. I'm writing because I finally understand what I took from you. Your career, your trust, your voice. I stole all of it because I was jealous of your potential. You were always smarter than me, and that terrified me. I know you'll probably delete this. I know I don't deserve a response. But I needed you to know. You were right to protect yourself from us. You were right to choose your real family, Rebecca. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to James with a note. Please keep this on file, but no response needed. I never replied to Rebecca. But I did something else. I increased my annual donation to the Women's Startup Center by the exact amount of the raise I would have gotten at Goldman Sachs if I'd made associate that year. Some boundaries, once set, should never be moved, not even for apologies that come too late. The aftermath rippled through my extended family like a stone dropped in still water. My cousin Elena called first, tentatively. Fiona, we saw what happened. Just so you know, not everyone agrees with your mom and Rebecca. But you all stayed silent when it mattered. We didn't know the whole truth. Rebecca told everyone you'd leaked confidential information. She made you sound reckless. And you all believed her without asking me. Elena's silence was telling. Then, you're right. We should have reached out. I'm sorry. These conversations happened sporadically over months. Aunts who suddenly remembered my birthday, uncles who wanted to catch up over coffee. Each one dancing around the same question, was there any money left for family? The answer was always no, but I said it differently each time. The trust is irrevocable. I've committed to other causes. My financial advisor handles all of that now. Mom tried one last manipulation 6 months later. She showed up at my apartment building, waiting in the lobby. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I ask. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in the coffee shop across the street, her hands wrapped around a cup she never drank from. Your father would be ashamed, she started. Dad would have been proud that I stood up for myself. He believed in family loyalty above everything. He believed in fairness. Remember when Rebecca broke my science project in 8th grade? He made her rebuild it with me. He didn't just tell me to forgive and forget. Mom's face crumpled slightly. That was different. No, it wasn't. You just chose to forget his lessons after he died. She pulled out an envelope. I brought photos of you and Rebecca as children, of better times. Keep them. Those children don't exist anymore. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm protected. There's a difference. She left the envelope on the table when she walked out. I threw it away unopened. The real vindication came a year later. Forbes featured Value True in their Startups to Watch issue. The article mentioned the launch party incident, framing it as a defining moment in Silicon Valley's evolution toward transparency and authentic leadership. Rebecca texted me a screenshot of the article with just 3 words. Dad would be proud. I didn't respond. But for the first time, I didn't delete her message either. Some wounds don't heal, but they can scar over enough that they stop bleeding. My chosen family, Sarah, my team at Value True, the women from the center, they celebrated with me properly. No demands, no expectations, just genuine joy for shared success. That's what real family does. The cease and desist letter James sent was a masterpiece of legal precision. Should you or any family member attempt to contact Ms. Martinez directly, through third parties, or via any digital platform, legal action will be pursued immediately. This includes, but is not limited to, showing up at her place of business, her residence, or any public events where she is present. Rebecca tested it once, 3 months later. She created a fake LinkedIn profile to message me about a business opportunity. James had her served with a restraining order within 48 hours. The judge, after reviewing the evidence of her previous sabotage and continued harassment, granted it for 3 years. Mom tried a different approach, guilt through flying monkeys. She'd call relatives who still talked to me, crying about her lost daughter. Each time, I had the same response. Mom knows how to reach my lawyer if there's a real emergency. The family reunions I'd once stressed about became non-issues. I wasn't invited anymore, and that was perfect. But the most satisfying boundary was the one nobody saw coming. 2 years after the launch party, Rebecca's husband reached out through James. She was getting divorced and had listed me as a financial reference, claiming I'd promised to help with her business ventures. Your client's sister has named her as a potential investor in her divorce proceedings, James told me, barely suppressing his amusement. She's claiming hidden assets based on a promised family investment from you. Send them the cease and desist, and the trust documents showing she could never be a beneficiary. The divorce court was not amused by Rebecca's lies. According to public records, she ended up owing her ex-husband more in the settlement because of her attempted fraud. Meanwhile, Value True had expanded to 3 countries. We'd helped over 10,000 small businesses get fair valuations. My voice, once too quiet for Goldman Sachs conference rooms, was now keynoting international conferences. The Women's Startup Center named their main conference room after me. Sarah insisted despite my protests. You changed the trajectory of our entire organization, she said at the dedication. That $1 million? It's generated over $30 million in economic activity through the businesses we've launched. That's when it hit me. Rebecca's betrayal hadn't just led to my success. It had created a ripple effect that lifted hundreds of other women. I stood in that conference room, looking at the placard with my name, and felt something I hadn't expected. Complete peace. Not forgiveness. Some things are unforgivable. Not forgetting. The lessons were too valuable. But peace. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another startup wanted Value True's services. Another woman entrepreneur, ready to know her worth. I smiled and got back to work. The best boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations for building something better. The viral video from the launch party became required viewing at Stanford's business school. Professor Williams, no relation to Sarah, used it in her course on crisis management and stakeholder relations. She invited me to speak to her class via Zoom 3 years after the incident. Ms. Martinez, your handling of that situation has become somewhat legendary. What would you tell students about managing family expectations in business? Document everything, I said. Hope for the best, but protect yourself for the worst. And never ever let anyone make you feel guilty for your success. A student raised her hand. Did you ever reconcile with your family? No, and that's okay. Sometimes the best relationship you can have with someone is no relationship at all. The speaking engagement led to others. Soon, I was on the circuit, talking about boundaries, betrayal, and building success from sabotage. Each time, women would approach me afterward with their own stories. Sisters who'd stolen clients, mothers who'd demanded ownership stakes, fathers who'd tried to control their daughters' companies. The pattern was always the same. Family members who contributed nothing but expected everything. One evening, after a particularly emotional event where 3 women shared stories of family financial abuse, Sarah and I sat in her office planning the next phase of the Women's Startup Center expansion. We need a specific program, I said, for women dealing with family interference in their businesses. The Boundaries Brigade? I laughed. Something less militaristic. How about the Independence Initiative? We launched it 6 months later with another $1 million donation, this time from Value True's Corporate Social Responsibility Fund. The program provided free legal consultations, financial planning, and emotional support for women entrepreneurs facing family sabotage. The first cohort had 60 applicants for 20 spots. By the third cohort, we had 400 applicants. Rebecca must have heard about it. A year into the program, James received a letter from her new lawyer. She wanted to volunteer as a cautionary tale speaker for the initiative. She says she wants to help by sharing her perspective as someone who sabotaged a family member's career, James read, his voice incredulous. She's positioning herself as reformed. She's positioning herself for image rehabilitation, I corrected. Tell her no, and remind her about the restraining order. But the letter did make me think. That night, I wrote a blog post about the difference between accountability and manipulation, about how true amends don't come with strings attached or hidden agendas. It went viral, too. Rebecca's name was never mentioned, but everyone who knew the story understood. Some boundaries aren't just personal, they become templates for others to follow, maps for navigating their own toxic territories. 5 years after the launch party, Value True went public. The IPO valued the company at $847 million. My 32% stake made me wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined while crying in that Goldman Sachs bathroom stall. But the money wasn't the victory, it was the vindication. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature. From fired analyst to IPO, the Fiona Martinez story. They'd interviewed former Goldman colleagues, including Richard, my old SVP. "We made a mistake," he was quoted as saying. "Fiona's analytical skills were exceptional. We let office politics and a malicious email override good judgment." But the quote that meant the most came from Tom, my former colleague who talked over me in every meeting. "Fiona's success doesn't surprise me. She was always the smartest person in the room. We just weren't smart enough to listen." The IPO paperwork included a section on family holdings. The answer was simple. None. Mom made one last attempt the day of the IPO. She sent a card to my office. Somehow she'd gotten the address. Inside, in her careful handwriting, "Your father would want us to reconcile. Congratulations on your success. Love, Mom." I kept the card, not out of sentiment, but as evidence. James added it to what he called the harassment file, just in case. The Women's Startup Center had grown into a national organization with chapters in 12 cities. The Independence Initiative had helped over 500 women set healthy boundaries with toxic families while building their businesses. My initial $1 million donation had multiplied into something worth so much more than money. At the IPO celebration, held at the same Ritz-Carlton where everything had exploded 5 years earlier, Sarah gave a speech. Fiona Martinez proves that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for your greatest achievement. She didn't just survive betrayal, she transformed it into a movement. The room was full of genuine supporters this time. No family drama, no ambushes, no demands. Just people who'd earned their place in my life through respect and reciprocity. Marcus Chen, now on our board, pulled me aside during the party. "You know they're watching, right? Your family. This is all over the news." "Let them watch," I said. "Let them see what I built without them. Let them understand that their betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me." No regrets? I thought about it. One regret. I wish I'd set boundaries sooner. I gave them too many years of my life before I learned to protect myself. "But if you had, would you be here now?" He had a point. Sometimes the path to success requires walking through betrayal first. Today, as I share this story with you, it's been 8 years since Rebecca's email destroyed my career and launched my real life. Value True operates in 17 countries, helping small businesses level the playing field against corporate giants. We've facilitated over $2 billion in fair value transactions. My voice, once too soft for Goldman Sachs, now reaches millions through TED Talks, podcasts, and conferences. But the real measure of success isn't in the numbers. It's in the emails I get every week from women who say, "Your story gave me permission to protect myself." It's in the daughters who tell me, "I showed your video to my mom when she demanded money from my startup." It's in the entrepreneurs who understand that family isn't always who you're born to. It's who stands by you when you're building from scratch. Rebecca still lives in Queens. According to LinkedIn, she's selling insurance now. The real estate career never recovered from the viral video. Mom lives alone in the same house, surrounded by photos of a family that no longer exists in the way she wanted it to. I know these things not because I look them up, but because James keeps tabs as part of the ongoing protective order. "They're living their consequences," he told me last month. "And you're living your life." The trust fund that caused such drama? It's now worth $3 million, still benefiting the Women's Startup Center. Sarah jokes that it's the gift that keeps on giving, not just financially, but as a symbol of choosing your real family. Last week, a young woman approached me after a speaking engagement. She was crying. "My brother leaked my business plan to my competitor," she said. "My parents are telling me to forgive him because blood is thicker than water." But watching your story, I realize that quote is incomplete. The full saying is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." The family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. I hugged her. Set your boundaries, document everything, and never apologize for protecting your success. That's my message to anyone reading this who's struggling with toxic family members who feel entitled to your success. You don't owe anyone access to what you've built, especially those who tried to tear you down. Your achievements aren't family property. Your boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. Family isn't about DNA. It's about respect, support, and showing up when it matters. It's about celebrating your success without calculating their cut. It's about love without ledgers. The family that demanded $500,000 at my launch party, they got exactly what they deserved, nothing. The family that supported me when I had nothing, they got everything. My loyalty, my trust, and $1 million donation that's still changing lives. Some people say I'm cold for cutting off my blood relatives, but I'm not cold. I'm free. Free from manipulation, free from guilt, free from people who saw my success as their ATM. And that freedom? It's worth more than any amount of money they could have demanded. So here's my question for you. What boundaries do you need to set? What toxic relationships are holding you back from your full potential? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a community of people who understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Remember, your success is yours to share, or not share, as you choose. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect your success from toxic family. What boundaries have you had to set? I'll heart the most powerful stories in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories about women who turned betrayal into triumph. Next week, I'm sharing the story of a woman whose mother-in-law tried to steal her business. Until then, remember, your success is yours to protect and share as you choose.